Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 139 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Almost heavy breathing there. A reminder, everyone, just to keep your headphones away from your microphones at all times so we can protect the hearing of our very valued interpreters. A reminder to the witnesses that our committee has passed a motion. Any documents requested are required within 21 days of the time. Before we open up with Mr. Mills for an opening statement, I just want to briefly, Mr. Kuzmierczuk and I were having a discussion at the end. I made some comments that came out not as I intended, so I do withdraw them. I apologize to Mr. Kuzmierczuk. We've worked well over the many years here at OGGO. It was not my intent as the words came out, so I thank you for your patience, and more importantly, I thank you for bringing it to my attention, Mr. Kuzmierczuk. We will now turn things over to Mr. Mills for 5 minutes and then Ms. Bujo for 5 minutes. The floor is yours, Mr. Mills. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Before I begin, I acknowledge that we're gathered today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Joining me today from PSPC is Dominic Laporte, Assistant Deputy Minister for Procurement. I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me today to speak to the findings of recent reports related to the contracts awarded to McKinsey and Company. Public Service and Procurement Canada takes these reports, including those tabled by the Procurement Ombudsman and the Auditor General of Canada, very seriously, and we are actively working to strengthen procurement practices in response to its recommendations. Most of them have already been put in place. Je me permets de souligner.
I will note that, first and foremost, no instances of political interference, wrongdoing, or fraud have been found by numerous internal and external reports on this matter. Nonetheless, the findings of these reports present us with an opportunity to improve our processes when it comes to professional services. I can tell you that PSPC continues to work with client departments and agencies to address these concerns and is implementing measures that strengthen and streamline oversight and controls. Mr. Chair, we know that to ensure value for taxpayer money, our processes and decisions must be clearly documented, and we are committed to transparency.
In mind, we have already taken immediate improvements in our processes and procedures. For example, this spring, PSPC created the Contract Quality and Records Compliance Office. This new function helps to ensure that procurement policies and processes are followed and business decisions are properly documented. So far, this new office has launched tools for peer-to-peer, supervisor, and director reviews of files and has established governance to review the findings and to develop action items where required. Mr. Chair, with regards to the issue of contracting vehicle use for McKinsey benchmarking services, as this committee has heard, establishing a non-competitive national master standing officer was a long-standing approach that had been in place for many years. Cela étant dit, nous reconnaissons que...
Having said that, we recognize that competition is the norm and a review of this procurement vehicle was overdue. These instruments have expired and are no longer in place, and PSPC is now directing that the professional services component of these services be competed. Mr. Chair, another area of concern in recent reports regarding McKinsey centers on the issuance of security clearances to contractors.
Previous assurances provided to the committee by our Deputy Minister in May that all the McKinsey resources added through task authorizations as part of the contracts reviewed by the Procurement Ombudsman had the required security level to perform the work and access sensitive information and assets. To address the underlying issue of insufficient documentation, we require confirmation that proof of security clearances has been received from clients before any work is undertaken going forward. These requirements are reflected in a new mandatory checklist, which now needs to be completed for all professional service procurement files. De plus, SPAC a donné suite à la...
In addition, PSPC has also addressed the Auditor General's recommendation regarding conflicts of interest. Although conflict of interest provisions were already included in the department's Code of Conduct, PSPC has since modified its guidance and tools to integrate obligations into the department's procurement process for professional services. key contracting and technical specialists are required to reaffirm that they are not in conflict of interest at various steps in the contract awarding process.
My department launched a new sector to ensure better oversight, consistency, and control over the procurement of all categories of professional services. This new sector underscores our commitment to enhancing efficiency and transparency and to fostering innovation in government procurement processes while delivering value for Canadians. Mr. Chair, these are only a number of important measures that we have implemented over the last few months to address concerns around procurement of professional services. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mills. Ms. Boudreau, welcome back. And of course, welcome back to everyone else here today. Go ahead, Ms. Boudreau.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner l'occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to address the committee on the issue of federal government consulting contracts awarded to McKinsey & Company. I have with me today Sherry Ostrich, Assistant Controller General, Internal Audit Sector, Emilio Franco, Executive Director, Procurement, Material, and Communities Directorate, Acquired Services and Assets. As this committee is aware, TBS and Public Services and Procurement Canada led a review of contracts with McKinsey & Company in early 2023. We asked departments to undertake an internal compliance audit of their McKinsey contracts from January 1st, 2011 to February 7th, 2023. The objective was to assess if the contracts complied with Treasury Board policy and departmental internal control frameworks. 10 departments completed independent compliance audits and developed management action plans to address administrative weaknesses. These documents were all provided to the Standing Committee of Government Operations and posted online. These audits determined that there was no evidence of political interference in the awarding of contracts. They did, however, identify instances where procurement rules and requirements were not consistently followed. In the final report of the joint TBS-PSPC review, which also took into account the proceedings of this committee, TBS identified broader actions to strengthen procurement practices. These included strengthening expectations for regular review and testing of procurement controls. Further, to help ensure clarity in rules, the Treasury Board Secretariat published the Manager's Guide, Key Considerations when Procuring Professional Services in the fall of 2023 and communicated the guide through CFOs, deputy CFOs, and communities of practice, including procurement practitioners. Key elements of this guide have now been embedded into mandatory procedures under the Directive on the Management of Procurement. In addition, this past March, the President of the Treasury Board and the Minister of Public Services and Procurement announced further actions the government is taking to strengthen procurement activities.
Audit Report 5 on professional services contracts, the Auditor General found evidence of gaps in adherence to procurement requirements similar to our own findings. Quite simply, contracting organizations need to do better, and we will continue to work across government to reinforce the responsibilities of those involved in contracting. As our sole recommendation, the AG recommended that the government effectively monitor and ensure that officials involved in procurement do not have conflicts of interest. TBS, which responded on behalf of the 10 audited departments and agencies, agrees with this recommendation. In exercising their duties, public servants must uphold the Values and Ethics Code for the public sector and adhere to the Directive on Conflict of Interest. The new mandatory procedures I mentioned provide additional measures to ensure managers are clear about their responsibilities and accountabilities related to oversight, conflict of interest, and values and ethics when contracting for professional services. Specifically, they require managers to certify that, first, they acknowledge their responsibilities in managing the contract. Second, they do not have a conflict of interest. Third, they have not directed which resources should be working under the contract. And last one, the contractor did not assist in or have unfair access to the solicitation process. Mr. Chair, we are committed to ensuring effective stewardship of public funds and managing its procurement activities responsibly. Practitioners across the procurement community are dedicated professionals who have an important and often complex job to do. TBS is continuously examining how best to support them through guidance, tools, and training to ensure that procurement make best use of public funds and preserve public trust. I'll be now happy to answer your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ms. Boudreau. We'll start with 6 minutes with Mrs. Kusi. Please go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Chair, we are here, of course, to discuss federal government consulting contracts awarded to McKinsey & Company. And this is an issue, as you know, we've been looking at for some time. I do believe, however, one of our significant conclusions in doing this large study on McKinsey was the inexplicable fact of the implication of Mr. Dominic Barton. So this is something that the official opposition focused on significantly, was the implication of Mr. Barton in his efforts with this government to run the government. However, Mr. Chair, we now have a new player, lo and behold, the new and latest advisor to the Prime Minister, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mark Carney. Carbon tax Carney, if you will, conflict of interest Carney, if you will, Mr. Chair. And for those of you who are listening who do not know Mr. Carney, I'd like to read an excerpt from Maclean's. Carney strides down the hall, beaming and vigorous, a man who looks born to inhabit the slimmest, silkiest Savile Row suit that Sterling can buy. With a much publicized pay packet of $1.7 million, he can well afford it. Young aides scurry around him, clutching files, checking encrypted phones, trying and failing to keep up with their 54-year-old boss. Much has been written about Carney's good looks, but in person, it's not so much the symmetry of his face that's remarkable as the way he moves, which is fast with the loose-limbed precision of a dancer, Mr. Chair. Perhaps he'd like to try some Bollywood with the Prime Minister sometime. But his ties to McKinsey, Mr. Chair, are also clear and evident. I have here the schedule from COP28. McKinsey at COP28, insights from our events. How can we deploy climate finance at a scale? McKinsey's Cindy Levy and Joseba Ecija led a discussion on closing this net zero finance gap with carbon tax Carney, Mark Carney, UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. So this is the first implication. I mentioned the tie-in, Mr. Chair, of his good friend Dominic Barton. We have here in the same Maclean's article a quote which says, he makes no effort to hide what his friend Dominic Barton, former McKinsey chief and now Canadian ambassador to China. And I'll also add, Mr. Chair, that lo and behold, it was Mark Carney who took the place after Dominic Barton of the advisory chair of the economic growth group that the Prime Minister put together. He described Mark Carney as the giant computer sitting on top of his head. So indeed, these two are very good friends. As well, this Maclean's article points to a part-time gig performed by Mr. Carney, where he was paid the sum of $1 US per year. Sounds very similar to the amount that Dominic Barton was in fact paid to lead this economic growth group. But I think the most relevant piece here today, Mr. Chair, is Mark Carney, in his role as the head of the Bank of England, the chair of the Bank of England, called in, who else? McKinsey, but to overhaul the process at the Bank of England. I have this news report here. Mark Carney has called in U.S. management consultants McKinsey to oversee a shakeup of the Bank of England strategy to impose a radical makeover on the old lady of Threadneedle Street. Again, I point to the relationship between Mark Carney and Dominic Barton. Again, someone who's been inextricably tied to McKinsey, McKinsey's implication in the running of this government. When its managing director, Carney's fellow Canadian Dominic Barton, was asked in a recent interview with Management Today if he knew conflict of interest, Carney? He replied, yes, he's a great guy, a tri-sector athlete, public sector, private sector, and government. He's fully rounded, gets into debate. A great signal that the UK gets talented people in from abroad. Talented people, Mr. Chair, or people connected to McKinsey? That's my question here today. So, Mr. Mills, my first question is, in 2013, when Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of England, one of his first decisions was to use McKinsey to completely overhaul the bank's organization, as I indicated. Based on your experience with McKinsey, in your opinion, is it a good idea to allow an outside organization such as McKinsey and not public servants to completely overhaul government systems?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I would not be well placed to answer whether that was advisable in that circumstance, but I would say that if you were to do a major transformation of any organization, you'd want to have a plurality of views and perspectives to get the best result.
Thank you very much. Madame Boudreau, I'll continue with you. A former member of the bank's Monetary Policy Committee at the time said it's not clear what the government is getting from the highly priced Carney, who is supposed to do this stuff himself. Do you think Canada is headed in a similar direction? We've seen a lot of unrest from the public service lately, displeasure with this government, displeasure with your minister, Anita Anand, who is, of course, responsible for the Treasury Board and the public service. Do you think Canada is headed in a similar direction, that we are using highly paid consultants and friends of the Prime Minister rather than the people who should be able to do the work themselves?
Thank you for the question. And like we share with the committee at few occasions, it's always a question to see if we have in-house the capacity to do the work. And when it's not the case, we have some needs to go outside and have the proper skills that we need in order to advance the priorities.
Thank you, Dominique Barton. And now, conflict of interest, carbon tax, Carney, Mr. Chair, tied to McKinsey. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mrs. Kusi. Mr. Kusmerchuk, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. Back to OGGO committee. It almost feels like a second home here for you guys. We've had you here in front of committee so often, but thank you very much for your work and your testimony. I would say, you know, oftentimes you see on Parliament Hill, you see those that are here searching for clips and searching to make performative performances or statements, and then there's those of us that are searching for answers and that are really seeking to improve the work of government. I wanted to ask you, first of all, I guess a quick question right off the bat. In any of the analyses and investigations that have been done, whether it's by PSPC, whether it's by TBS, whether it's by the AG or the Procurement Ombudsman, was there any evidence that you have seen, that you're aware of, that there was any political interference?
Thank you for the question. Based on the work that was performed last year by the internal audit departments, which there are independent internal audit function of each department, and also work in conformance with the Institute of Internal Audits, the conclusion was that there was no interference.
Based on any of the investigations that were done, either by the Auditor General, by the Procurement Ombudsman, by PSPC, and by Treasury Board, was there any evidence of corruption that you came across?
I will refer again to the OPO report as well as the AG report and our own internal audit. There was no political interference.
And and was there any corruption evidence that was found in those 4 investigations?
Same conclusion, no.
There was, however, in the Procurement Ombudsman's report, there was a discussion. A flag was raised about potential favoritism towards McKinsey, and that is something I know that obviously raised questions, serious questions around this table, rightfully so. So I wanted to ask you, was there favoritism in the awarding of contracts to McKinsey? And I also wanted to ask, because I am forward focused and future focused as well too. we're interested in seeing improvements to the processes at hand. So I wanted to ask you, how is this being addressed? So the two questions are, was there any favoritism towards McKinsey from your estimation? And then how is this being addressed?
I'll start. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The Ombuds report explicitly say that they applied negative inference to come to the conclusion that there was bias. While we find the findings of fact correct and we agree with the recommendations, we do not agree with the negative inference that there was bias by PSBC employees in the selection of McKinsey. But what we do take from this as a strong lesson is when you do not have proper documentation, you do not explain your procurement process, you do not explain your rationale clearly for the choice of a firm or a method, it can create a vacuum into which people can make negative inference.
Thank you. If I may add, Mr. Chair, also, I would like to point out also that various instruments similar to the one that was established with McKinsey have been established over time with different suppliers, so since 1995. So I think it's important to put this long-standing practice that needed to be improved for sure, and we welcome the recommendation of the AG and the OPO. But I think putting that in context and appreciating that McKinsey got 13% out of these contracts in terms of value over the time. So thank you.
One of the weaknesses that both the procurement ombudsman and the AG report flagged or highlighted is lack of documentation. That was repeated over and over and over again. Lack of documentation or insufficient documentation or gaps in documentation. The importance of showing your work. And Mr. Laporte, when you appeared before this committee in May, you mentioned 98% of PSPC procurement is now covered by an e-procurement system. So we're talking about improvements, how we can strengthen documentation, how we can strengthen administration of procurement. Can you explain to us a little bit about what e-procurement is and its benefits, especially as it relates to oversight and documentation?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So basically, in terms of the value of contract that are now on the EPS platform, it's a cloud platform, we're talking about $25 billion. So it's a lot of procurement that are now captured by this EPS platform. If we go back a few years ago, procurement officer would work on files and they would get email, they would get fax, they would be basically receiving also hard copies of bid. So you can imagine all the interaction, and you've got also different teams, different people working on those files. So one of the huge plus of the EPS platform has been able to consolidate all the interaction, the question, answers that potential bidders may have on the procurement. So everything is safeguarded as part of this cloud platform. In terms of openness also, much more transparent, the ability to bid electronically. So there's a lot of benefit that we've seen. We've been also able to put 17,000 legacy contracts that are now available on EPS. So a huge progress that has been made, which is addressing in part. This is not the only solution, but addressing some of the deficiencies that have been witnessed. And I know that our DMA did mention the creation of a new position, the Chief Quality Assurance and Records Compliance Office. This is a huge thing.
Thanks, Mr. Laporte. Colleagues, just quickly, Ms. Boudoir Ms. Boudreau, mentioned compliance audits. They were given to us March of last year, the 10 compliance audits. If you're looking for them, they are in our digital binder. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Ma première question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll let you put your earpieces in. You ready? Okay. So my first question is for Mr. Mills. The Auditor General report showed that some suppliers had not been in compliance with their supply chains of contracts. So initially they had gotten a competitive or a non-competitive contract that was below the threshold the low value threshold. During your speech, you said that this was a way of proceeding that has existed for many years. Personally, I think that if we look at it this way, then humans should still be in caves. If we always do things the way they've always been done, then we wouldn't be talking today with the technology that we have in front of us. We would be in a cave. How are we analyzing these processes to ensure that even if it's been years that it's been done this way, how are we ensuring that it's being done in an effective way that's increasing profit and that is properly dealing with the issues that we face today? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Firstly, I would say we were focusing on competitive processes instead of non-competitive processes. Dominique Laporte, as Deputy Minister, added processes to ensure that when using non-competitive processes, rather that we're minimizing the use of these non-competitive processes, and that they're only used in the case of an exemption.
Have subscriptions such as specific software and whatnot, that we would be really minimizing the use of these non-competitive instruments specifically for those. The other things I would say is on ajouté des règles concernant.
We also added rules on the length and the end date of the contract and the value of the contract. But in certain cases, for some contracts, we may need to extend them. But overall, we focus on competitive contracts.
On the non-competitive contracts.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mills. Ms. Boudreau, earlier you spoke about strengthening requirements. We see this a lot. There's a policy, we want it to be applied. And we ask the question, who is really verifying that it's being implemented? And everyone puts the onus of this on someone else. So who is really doing the oversight on this? Is it the department? Does the department know that this is their role, or does the department expect that it be the Treasury Board that's doing this, seeing as the Treasury Board establishes the requirements? So there's two steps for the oversight. Firstly, it's internal, inside the department. All departments have an internal auditor sector. So the internal auditor will look at the last year's reports, do the follow-up on the action plans, and give management self-evaluation. That's the first step. Second step right now, the Treasury Board Secretariat under my direction will look at the bidding process, will look at internal contracts. So this audit should be done by the end of the calendar year, and the results will be published at the beginning of the following year. So two steps. Thank you. I'm going to ask you another question, please. Ms. Boudreau, you gave out a management guide 2023. My question is, who created this guide? Did you work with academics who are specialists in human resources? Did you go consult with consulting companies? I don't know what the word is in French because I always hear it in English, but looking at a benchmark. Who allowed you to create this guide? So I'll begin my answer, and then I will let Emilio answer because he was present. So we've done a lot of analysis with the public service in general, with those who are specialists in the solicitation process, those in public works, those in human resources, and those who work in the public service on employee training. So could you add something to that, Emilio? Yes, that's exactly it. As it's been written in the public service, We have spoken with experts and departments in procurement rather, those who establish contracts for professional services to ensure that we have a good view of the situation. And where do these experts come from? They're internal. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Vignola. Mr. Bachrach, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. Welcome back to OGGO. This is obviously a complicated topic, and I think for members of the public who might be watching, I can't imagine there are too many, but for those hardy souls, I think we can get lost a little bit in some of the nuance and the detail of it. But I was reading through, refreshing my memory of some of the Auditor General's findings, and one that really stands out to me is the idea that the procurement strategy appeared to be designed in 4 of the 28 competitive contracts. The procurement strategy appeared to be designed and implemented to suit McKinsey and Company. And, you know, it reminded me of some of the findings related to ArriveCan, where in some cases the vendor was in communication with the procuring agency around the criteria for the procurement, so that, you know, it's essentially about designing a procurement strategy to fit the needs of certain vendors so that they get the work. And I think we can all agree that when it comes to competitive procurement, that's kind of against the rules. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. I see you nodding. So, like, this feels like a bit of a no-brainer, and yet this is what the Auditor General says looks like happened here. And she goes on to say, it found that McKinsey was not a pre-qualified vendor under the supply arrangement originally considered. The contract requirements were then modified to be able to use a different supply arrangement. No documentation was found that would support the change in approach. Now, my question, like, there are 2 things that could be happening here. One is that they made the right decision, they just didn't show their work. And the other one is that they made the wrong decision and they actually put their thumb on the scale for McKinsey. And my question to you is, which of those 2 scenarios is the true one? Which reflects the reality of what happened in those 4 cases? Or sorry, 2 cases, 2 of the 4.
For the question. So I think it's important to keep in mind that we were dealing with various departments. So many departments were part of that finding of the OAG. I can assure that oftentimes this is something common. A procurement officer will ask questions, will shift, basically will provide advice to the client. If, for example, McKinsey was not qualified under a particular solution, I think it's normal looking at the requirement that the client is trying to achieve to basically make sure that we've got the right instrument. So I wouldn't want to draw favoritism for that. I think it has to be put in that context. And on top of that, also, this is something that we are asking our procurement officer to do much more, is to challenge and to document. So if a decision is made, we don't want to be in a situation where negative inference is being drawn. So we want to be able to document why that advice was provided, what was the rationale of it. And I think really putting the emphasis on challenge function, challenging the client to make sure that the reason why they're doing a certain procurement strategy is the right one and fulfill the obligation of transparency and fairness.
I appreciate that, Mr. Laporte. It doesn't seem to get to the question, which is the Auditor General found that the procurement strategy appeared to be designed and implemented to suit McKinsey. Perhaps a more pointed question would be, if that was indeed the case, would it have been inappropriate?
Well, if indeed that would have been inappropriate if it was, I think some of the finding also, what we were putting in place.
that was yes,
it would have been inappropriate.
inappropriate.
So I think also looking back at other practices, so we did put in place non-competitive standing offer with McKinsey. So we were going with McKinsey, advertising basically for these contracts, we're going with McKinsey based on the proprietary right information that was there. So I think it's important to situate that. In terms of the other contracts that were competitive, I just want to point to the fact that they were done by various departments. So the motivation as to why a certain procurement strategy was chosen, I'm not able to comment on that one.
Okay, perhaps switching gears a little bit to the internal review. So there was a joint TBS-PSPC internal review that found many, you were saying, found many of the same things the Auditor General found.
which is good. You're looking at the same information and you have the same findings. I'm curious about what spurred the internal review and what the timing of that was relative to the Auditor General's work and the Procurement Ombudsman's work.
The internal review was requested by the Prime Minister. He asked the Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada, as well as the President of Treasury Board, to conduct a review of McKinsey.
And this was happening concurrently with the Auditor General's review and the Procurement Ombudsman's review?
The Minister of PSPC requested the OPO to do a review. It was at the request of the Minister. And the AG was requested, if I'm not mistaken, by this committee to do a review of McKinsey.
So my recollection of how this kind of played out was that there was, it became known publicly that McKinsey had gotten all of this work, and it looked odd. It looked, abnormal. It looked like they were getting, a lot of government work, and the controversy around the magnitude of that outsourcing spurred the government to demand all these answers. That's a fair recollection? Now, my question is, you have internal audit processes. You have the internal auditor here with us. Did those internal audit processes, because this goes back years and years, did those internal audit processes prior to the internal TSB PSPC review that the Prime Minister demanded, did none of those internal processes find these really egregious shortcomings in the procurement process that was being carried out? Like the things we've heard at previous meetings, we heard.
Past our time, maybe we can get a brief answer.
Can I just add one more thing? We heard that the agencies procuring the contracts didn't understand the rules. The people doing the procurement didn't understand the rules. Did you not find that prior to the big public controversy?
So I will answer that one if I could. Can you hear me okay? First time speaking. Good morning, everyone. So what I would say is every department has a risk-based audit plan, and procurement can be looked at and would have been looked at. I wouldn't have the results of all of the audits over time. But obviously, this was new information that we needed to take action on. So I can't speak of what all the findings of other departments were in the past, but the plans are risk-based. So if a department does have an issue or risks are significant in an area, there would have been procurement audits done in the past. There's a number that goes on every year.
Thanks very much. We'll go to our next round. Start with Mr. Genuis. As usual, in our first round, we allowed everyone to go over time. I just asked everyone to keep an eye on the clock and leave time for a response. Mr. Genuis, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I want to build on some of the comments of my colleague, Ms. Kuzi. My biggest concern is that we have this McKinsey model of inappropriate relationships between government and big business that is actually being deployed again with the appointment of Mark Carbon Tax Carney. In general, I would say that a free market economy requires a sharp distinction between government and business, especially big business. Public entities have to be able to make neutral and fair decisions based on the common good and without personal favoritism. They respond to democratic deliberations about the common good. And then private entities, on the other hand, are partial. They seek to advance their own interests. They are primarily responsible for advancing particular goods as opposed to the common good, and they play an important role in our economy as players on the field advancing their own particular interests. And one of the biggest problems we've seen in politics over the last 9 years has been a blurring of these lines. Big government and big business getting together, in particular big business getting into government and seeking to shape outcomes to their advantage. And the call for good people to engage in public service is used as an excuse for allowing some very elite personalities to keep a foot in both worlds. It's fine for someone to come from the business world into politics, provided that they're prepared to sever ties and not be bridging these two worlds in a way that creates serious conflict of interest problems. And yet we've seen this, what I would call a McKinsey model. Dominic Barton was chairing the Finance Minister's Advisory Council on Economic Growth. Andrew Pickersgill at McKinsey was supporting Dominic Barton's efforts by supplying analysts to the government. At the same time, Mr. Pickersgill was involved in selling to the government. There was a generous so-called offer from McKinsey to serve, while at the same time using the access that they gained to sell, and they made a lot of money in the process. That is, I see, the core problem that undermines independent, impartial public deliberations about the common good and skews the playing field to the advantage of a well-connected private company. So today we're seeing the deployment of the McKinsey model again in the case of Mark Carney, being appointed a economic advisor to the Liberal Party, which is, of course, in government for the time being. And he is, at the same time, maintaining various leadership positions in the private sector, particularly with Brookfield. And it's come out that Mark Carney, the sitting chair of Brookfield, at the same time as he's advising the governing party, at the same time as Brookfield is applying to Ottawa for the creation of this massive multi-billion-dollar asset fund that would be extremely advantageous to Brookfield, the company that he is in charge of. So, I look at what's happening here from the Dominic Barton corporatist fusing together of government and big business, and then I see the same thing happening again with Mark Carney, and it just brings home the point: have in 9 years have these people learned nothing? Or maybe they have learned something, but they've learned the wrong lessons. They've learned that they want to further refine this model of bringing together big business and big government to the advantage of a few well-connected elites. So I want to put it to the officials. Do you see a problem with this model, this structure that allowed McKinsey and that is now allowing Brookfield to have a level of access that simply would not be available to any other normal private company?
Mr. Chair, I really couldn't speak to the relationship and the role of these entities in advising the Prime Minister of the government. That we're not involved in that at all. I can say, with respect to McKinsey, the volume of contracts went up when we put in place a non-competitive benchmarking instrument. Lots of departments were looking for benchmarking. Right now, we've taken measures that is.
Okay, I am going to press you to just comment on this advice piece, because you see the problem that Dominic Barton comes in, Andrew Pickersgill, running the Canadian operations, is supplying analysts to the government at the same time as he's selling to the government. That access is access that others didn't have, and so in getting from there to the master standing offer, I mean it's pretty clear that there's some relationship between the access and the result.
Just a brief answer, please.
A brief answer. I failed to see a connection between advice to the Prime Minister and the government on economic policy and a Director General from a department such as ESTC that's implementing an IT project seeking a benchmarking study.
If it's the same person?
Thanks very much. Mr. Baines, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us again at OGGO. I wanted to talk a little bit about the manager's guide, and TBS released an update. Key considerations when procuring professional service, and how will this additional guidance from TBS improve spending of the taxpayer dollars?
Thank you for the. Indeed, the updated manager's guide was done on March 20th, 2024, so this fiscal year. So the updates included reinforcing manager responsibilities for 5 elements. The first one, examine existing human resources and staffing strategies prior to deciding to procure professional services. The second one, provide a clear statement of work and fair evaluation criteria by which a supplier is selected. The third one, exercise due diligence to maintain the integrity of a procurement. Number 4, ensuring that there is no conflict of interest. And the last one, monitor and document the delivery of services and ensure that obligations under the contract are met, including by subcontractors, prior to issuing payments. Thank you.
Okay, and they're also TBS is also introducing a new risk and compliance to more actively oversee government-wide management practices and outcomes. And we just heard how that oversight became limited. So, what changes are going to be made there to introduce the new risk and compliance to more actively? What like how will they actively be doing this oversight?
You are correct. The risk and compliance was announced in the budget 2024, and TBS is taking the lead. TBS is doing a lot of work to make sure that we are scoping the right elements to look at. And in fact, it is, again, to reinforce accountabilities and responsibilities. So the risk and compliance process will assess the department compliance and performance in areas of administration with a view to ensuring that DPLEs have a line of sight of challenges and risk related to their accountabilities. And this process will allow TBS to identify and address systemic challenges across government. The process, like I was saying, which is in early stages of development, will examine a range of core areas, including procurement, service delivery, financial management, and cybersecurity, to ensure that departments and public funds are being well managed. That will reinforce the importance of management excellence and stewardship, and this process will track improvements needed to address deficiencies and include clear consequences where non-compliance with rules and requirements is not addressed. So,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Please.
So in summary, procurement will be included in the risk and compliance, but it will be broader, will include also financial management and also estimate process and human resources.
So on the financial management piece there, we've seen consulting firms and service contracts rise year over year. If we even go way back to 2010, but can you talk a little bit about the decline? We're seeing a decline now, and to what extent the federal government is depending on these firms.
As previously discussed here by myself, actually, the government went ahead last year with refocusing government spending. The refocusing government spending had two components. One of them was to reduce operating budget and also grants and contribution. And the other component was to reduce professional services. And the President of Treasury Board tabled during Supplementary Estimate B last year a reduction in professional services of about $350 million. And when she did table the main estimate, there was also an amount there in reduction of professional services as well.
Thanks very much. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mills. Earlier, my colleagues were talking about a report that stated that there didn't seem to be any favoritism, but nevertheless, in your answer, you said that there is a lack of certain steps in the procedure to be able to confirm this or deny it. So despite this report, it's difficult to confirm or deny this because there's a lack of documentation. So how can we deal with this lack of documentations to ensure that there is no favoritism? Because right now it's difficult to determine, and the public service is, we can say, a large ship, a sort of big cruise ship that's difficult to maneuver. quickly. So how do we make things move along expediently? Thank you for the question.
One of the things that we've taken to heart is the need to actually, at the front, define the statement of work, what it is that we want to see, and define a procurement process, and to rationalize why we're choosing that process against that statement of work. That alone will reduce any significantly ability to actually have favoritism. For more significant contracts within PSBC, we put in place a procurement review committee where we're actually bringing those statement of works and those procurement strategies early on in the process for another layer of due diligence to ensure that we have a strategy that is rational, that makes sense and can stand probity. So I think having those measures in place, we will reduce the risk of having favoritism. Again, as you mentioned, it's a very large organization. Departments, there always an opportunity that someone could favor one group over another, but we are taking measures to really reduce that risk and to bring more due diligence to avoid it.
Thank you,
May I add
Mrs.
something?
McNulta. Mr. Bachrach, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll try to pick up where I left off, and we were talking about the internal audit process. And it seems to me, on a simplistic level anyway, that a risk-based audit process would look at areas where it's more likely that you're going to see things going wrong, and it would focus attention on those areas as opposed to spending attention on lower probability or lower consequence areas. Now, in this case, it seems like the internal audit process totally missed something that's really bad. You know, according to the Auditor General in her scathing report, this is really bad stuff. And then when you did a joint review, as ordered by the Prime Minister, you found that indeed it was really bad. The internal process missed all this stuff because it was looking elsewhere. So the question is, the internal risk-based audit process, how is it going to change so that you don't continue to miss big stuff based on your assessment of the risk?
Mr. Chair, I can handle that one. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So I would say that, as I was explaining, risk-based audit plans have been done. There would have been ones done on procurement before. And I will say, while I don't have a copy of all of them here, a lack of documentation generally is not a surprising finding. So there would be in the past audits that have shown information management practices could have been improved. So I would say I do not believe that the internal audits missed this. There's also a requirement based on internal auditing standards that if we on any audit see improvements, gaps, possible fraud, that we have an obligation to report those. Those would have been over the past improved. How we didn't find this particular issue with one company. It's a large, as we've heard at committee, a large organization across the board, Government of Canada. So audit is spread out. We have small teams at departments, but we won't find every single thing. It is based on risk, but there has been audits done in the past in this area, and they will continue. We're doing a new one on horizontal that will hopefully also strengthen our areas of focus in this area until the risks are diminished.
So can I interpret that as you saying there's no bird's eye view? Our teams are all focused on specific departments and they have their head down in their binders and no one's looking at the fact that this global consulting firm seems to be getting all the work and it's not being flagged as a risk?
Well, so I have oversight across all audit shops for
Right.
that, but audit, and I don't want to use too much technical language in audit, but it's a third line. So the responsibility of good management practices first is with management. So it would be with the leads of procurement, deputy heads as the accounting officers. That's where the responsibility is for good business practice. Audit is down the line based on the risks to find and actually advise deputy heads where it may be offside and you need to come back. So that's where we're an advisory and also an independent voice to tell deputies when there is an item.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Kusi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm just reviewing again through OPQ's order paper questions some of the contracts that were awarded. $1.8 million with a contract extension to McKinsey to advance cultural evolution through stakeholder analysis. That's quite the contract for $1.8 million. $339,000, a sole source contract. $500,000, $517,387, another sole source contract, and then a $5.7 million contract from August of 2022 to February of 2023. So significant contracts. On February 6, 2023, your minister at the time, Helena Jazik, said that of the 24 contracts that were awarded to McKinsey by PSPC since 2011, 3 of them, worth more than 50% of the total value, were awarded through open, fair, and transparent competition. Yet, according to the AG report, you were only responsible for 3 contracts totaling over $26 million, and only one of these were competitive. Why was that the case, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we had 3 contracts. The 2 other were non-competitive. One got cancelled, so there was basically no call-up issued. And the other one was below $25,000, which will allow for non-competitive contract in those instances. So PSPC, 3 contracts, one of around $26 million, that was a competitive one, and the one that got cancelled was the one that was below the $25,000 threshold.
Thank you very much for that response. Also, further to our questioning last year, I would like to please get on the record how many cases of contracting fraud and contracting abuse has your department and the government turned over to the RCMP, please? How many?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I'm not the responsible for that. This is our oversight branch, Madame Catherine Poulin, that did appear many times, that has these numbers and that has oversight for cases of fraud and those cases that have been referred to the RCMP.
Okay. Well, RCMP said in the spring they have approximately 7 investigations related to federal contracting. So I was looking for the total number, but it's evident to me that more is to come. On February 6, 2023, the PSPC minister, again at that time, Minister Jazik, stated that the minister's office is not involved in any way in awarding these contracts. According to the Procurement Ombudsman report that came out earlier this year, the previous PSPC minister, Minister Tassi, had personally signed off on an ESDC McKinsey contract worth $5.7 million. Can you please explain why the minister stated that the government was not involved when there was clear evidence of another minister signing a contract?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So that one was exceeding the delegated authority of our deputy minister at the time. It's routine practice to send those instances to the minister. So, and this is something also that got confirmed by the Procurement Ombudsman when it did appear in front of this committee, in terms of the reason why that one got directed to the Minister Tassi back then. Thank you.
I would think if the minister is required to sign off on contracts while simultaneously knowing little about the contracting, wouldn't it mean that the minister would be incapable of making independent choices, as my colleagues and I have been inferring about contracting?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, the approval for the contract in question was by Minister Tassi. I believe that the comment that you made around none coming to her office was Minister Jazik.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, I wonder what the purpose of the Minister of Procurement is if it's not, in fact, to procure the contracts and sign for the procurement of the contracts. Mr. Chair, my final question will be, my colleague, Mr. Genuis, have shown that there is an absolute link between Dominique Barton and Mr. Carney to McKinsey, and therefore McKinsey's oversight of this government. And given the evidence that we have put forward throughout the last spring and continue to put forward today, the horrible record of McKinsey in many regards, which we have provided an example of before, their implication in the opioid crisis, their holding of a major event next to a Uyghur camp. My final question is McKinsey and Company banned from applying for contracts with the Government of Canada? Please say yes.
Mr. Chair, McKinsey and Company is eligible to compete in processes for contracts with the Government of Canada.
expect more from conflict of interest, carbon tax, Carney, Mr. Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Atwin, please. Or Ms. Atwin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us again today. The report speaks about, the audit report speaks about a contract where there was a lack of security documentation on file for a project. In particular, one individual whose security clearance wasn't found. Can you explain what happened in this case, and did someone without security clearance work on this project?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I can confirm that, as I said in my opening statement, that all resources that worked on these contracts were cleared for had appropriate security clearances. I cannot speak to why the documentation was not added to the file. It was not a question of whether the individual did not have security clearance. It was an issue that there wasn't a document on file confirming that they did. We have taken measures, and we're put in place now a checklist to ensure before any resources start work on contracts that they have confirmed and we have on file confirmation that they have sufficient security clearance to undertake the work.
Excellent, thank you. And Mr. Laporte, you previously mentioned that 98% of PSBC's procurement is now covered by an e-procurement system. Can you explain what e-procurement is and its benefits, particularly when it comes to improving this documentation and oversight?
Yeah, no, it plays a huge part in making sure that we've got sound record-keeping practices. When you've got a single repository to keep all your information pertaining to all procurement, keep in mind that we have basically $26 billion in value, more than 17 contracts and that are awarded every year by PSPC. So this is a huge amount of records that needs to be tracked, properly documented, properly filed. So the beauty of EPS is that, for example, you've got 100 bid and response to solicitation. It's all going to be filed under one single place. Communication between bidders and the contracting authority, everything is going to be recorded. So it does ensure that we do have transparency and the process. And disability also, I'm very sad every time that I see, because I know that our procurement officers, they are truly professional. They don't wake up in the morning with the intention of favoring one company over another, but at the same time, we appreciate the need to be able to properly document things. So this is a key priority for me and something that we're tackling with EPS. We're addressing with EPS. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. And when it comes to the National Master Standing Offer mechanisms, PSBC has already said that these mechanisms are all being allowed to expire and to not be renewed. So McKinsey's expired more than a year ago, for example. So how many active National Master Standing Offers remain, and what measures have been taken surrounding professional services, service contracts awarded under the NSMO mechanism?
So in terms of the one that were in issue with the OAG finding, so all of them are basically no longer active. They've been canceled, they were not renewed. So I want to say that in terms of benchmarking an MSO with McKinsey or other firms with respect to benchmarking services, those are no longer in place. And what we've seen also, the ability to put a non-competitive NMSO or standing offer in place is now being basically delegated at the ADM level. So I don't think we should be seeing those very often, and I fail honestly to see the need for those tools now. I think they've been put in place. We had the opportunity to renew our prices, to have a second look at that. So we're kind of taking into account the feedback that has been received. So those tools in future will be extremely rare, and this is why delegated authority is at the ADM level to put them in place.
Great. So I know that PSBC is working on a replacement mechanism. Are you able to share any updates on that process?
Yes, of course. So when we look at this particular categories of services, they are complex because there is one component that is oftentimes proprietary. The data that belongs to a particular company that they've been able to acquire through various survey of the industries as a whole. You want to know where you situate yourself amongst your peer. So these basically large players do have proprietary information. What we want to do is basically carefully kind of dissociate what is a subscription services from what we're going to be doing with those subscriptions. So if the goal is to receive advice to a department, to a DG, that should be a competitive process. That advice component, that professional services component should be basically run competitively. So there's no reason to extract and then take that and then ask for a sole source. So this is what we want to address and we've been addressing. So competition is is the norm for those services in future.
Thank you very much, Ms. Atwin. Mr. Genuis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start with a comment about the relationship between McKinsey and the opioid crisis. As I think is relatively well known by now, Purdue Pharma was largely responsible for the opioid crisis by over-promoting with false information new opioid products that they produced. It was presented as sort of the catch-all, problem-free solution to pain, and it led to intense personal pain and trauma for so many families, and that is continuing. At a time when people were becoming aware of many of these problems, Purdue Pharma sought the assistance of McKinsey to try to whitewash what was going on. And McKinsey worked with Purdue Pharma and gave them advice that would horrify the moral sensibilities of most Canadians about various tools that they could use to try to keep the money pouring in at the expense of people who were negatively affected by opioid substance use disorders. Our proposal as Conservatives is to make the pushers of these drugs pay financially for all of the costs associated with the opioid crisis, and to put that money into prevention, treatment, and recovery, to make the pushers pay for the problems that they caused, and to use those resources to assist people who are struggling. The approach of the current government, by contrast, is actually to continue to pay the pushers, to continue to allow McKinsey to benefit from lucrative government contracts, and to have a so-called safe supply policy, which continues to see money go to Purdue Pharma to produce opioid products that are then given away at taxpayers' expense to people who are struggling. They are paying the pushers while we want to make the pushers pay. What would you say to Canadians who find it deeply troubling and offensive that companies like McKinsey, like Purdue Pharma, are still cashing in big time as a result of government contracts instead of being held accountable for the damage that they caused?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I would say that, again, in being responsible for procurement, I wouldn't really be able to speak to the policy and the outcomes with respect to the opioid crisis. What I can assure Canadians are, with our new Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance, we are analyzing companies. We're looking for instances where companies have maybe defrauded governments, where they have been involved in corruption and collusion, and we're making sure that we're not doing business with those entities. With respect to the NMSO and the work that was done, I would note that that work has been done by McKinsey and Company Canada and has been very focused on benchmarking, transformation, IT, procurement, not on health advice.
Okay. Look, this is a question about procurement, right? It's not a question about health policy. It's a question about procurement. When procurement decisions are being made and you have tens of thousands of Canadians that have died as a result of the opioid crisis, those procurement decisions, the companies that benefit from those procurement decisions, obviously a message is sent to Canadians, to their families, to their communities who have suffered, when companies that, in this case, McKinsey, that was part of the process of offering advice to Purdue Pharma, is able to benefit from these contracts. So do you consider the public interest? Do you consider the impact on those families from giving such a large volume of contracts to a company that was instrumental to their suffering? Is that part of your calculation, or is it not something that you do, or you're supposed to, or you're able to take into consideration?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. When we're looking at procurement again, some of the factors we take into: is a company legally able to operate within the country? We'll look at, have they been convicted, or are they charged with fraud, corruption, collusion in in Canada, in any provinces or territories and other.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump in because I'm running out of time. The irony of this, though, is that this government has for so long been reluctant to hold these big corporations accountable for what happened in the opioid crisis. So your criteria for considering them eligible for procurement, whether or not they've been held accountable for these actions, isn't triggered precisely because this government has failed to take actions to hold these companies accountable. You have a close relationship between Dominic Barton and McKinsey and the government, a failure to hold them accountable, and then that lack of accountability being invoked as a justification for continuing to use them to procure services. Meanwhile, so many Canadians have suffered as a result of the opioid crisis. McKinsey and Purdue have had to pay massive compensation in the United States. McKinsey alone, I think, $500 million in the United States. They're not being held accountable because of the cozy relationship we see between these big corporations and the government.
Thanks. It is past our time. Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses again for returning to OGGO. Unfortunately, there seems to be ever increasing practice of infantile name calling and an attempt to disparage prominent Canadians who promote success around the world. I guess my question to you, is it appropriate then for leaders to seek out global economic advice from industry experts?
Thank you for the question. As I said before, I think if you're dealing with large transformations, in which many of these projects involved, it is appropriate to try and look globally to G7 counterpart countries to see what other countries are doing, to see what lessons have been learned in similar type projects as part of the formation of strategies, and to also benchmark and compare how you're doing.
So there's been standards for departments to review global business processes and performance metrics in regards to professional services contracts. That's been the case.
Yes.
Is that anything new? Is that something that has been the case throughout previous generations of government?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might turn to my colleague from the OCG in terms of some of the kind of analytics that are done around projects, and that was driving some of this analysis.
So, when it comes to projects in government, there is a view that it's important to get independent advice. Now, that independent advice doesn't always have to come from outside government. It can come from internal evaluators, and as my colleague has highlighted. But as part of a regular practice, when you're embarking on something new, you may not have expertise in house, and so it is important to look at outside advice. Now, we can't speak for how the government is deciding to get that advice, but within the government of Canada and the public service, we do look to contracts where that expertise cannot be found within.
Is there any evidence then of conflict of interest relative to some of the advice provided to the leaders of government who are not engaged in the procurement process or in the decision making, to then yourselves and your group who are actually dealing with the procurement practice and processes? Is there any evidence of conflict or interference by elected officials?
So I think it's important to reiterate that in our own internal review, in the review of the procurement ombudsman, and in the review of the Auditor General, there is no political interest found, no corruption, and no cases of fraud.
So the role, what is the role for PSPC in dealing with setting those requirements for client departments? Like, what is that engagement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The client is responsible for determining what their business need is. They're requiring for the statement of work and ultimately identifying what kind of outputs and outcomes they're trying to achieve. And really, our role is working with them on trying to ensure that they have a procurement strategy that will get them the most qualified firm that will actually be able to meet those needs and deliver value for Canadians.
Right. And so we know that PSPC awarded 3 contracts to the standard competitive process. So my question then is, how much do they represent the total value of the contracts awarded to McKinsey? I'm trying to get a sense. McKinsey, a global organization, what is their actual engagement in Canadian procurement with Canada, the government of Canada?
I made the information that I had, and it really depends on the time period that you're looking for. But if I remember, over the last 3 years, it was basically 13%. So it was in terms of the amounts that were represented by McKinsey. So we need to confirm the time period on that, but it was 13.5, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you.
Has McKenzie been found acting untoward? Have they been producing what they've been engaged to do?
It's thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's really for the client basically to make that judgment call in terms of when we look at the contracts that were awarded to McKinsey. But there was no evidence of client that were brought to our attention not having received the services under the contracts.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You still have a bit of time if you wish, Mr. Souza.
Well, let's chat a little bit more then in regards to this is important because what I'm trying to ensure is that the relationship that has occurred and the requirement for leaders to take on advice from others, like the idea is being proposed is be closed-minded and not seek out advice. Advice is, I think, is important for all of us concerned at every level. So in regards to some of the other questions being proposed, I would like to know if in the previous testimony, this horizontal audit that's been discussed and the assessing of these professional contracts, could you describe to the committee what is involved in doing such an audit?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. It's always exciting to talk about audits when you're in my job. So for a horizontal audit, it is across government that we're taking a look, and it's, I think, positive into, it's a balance between, there's a lot of audits out there already and reviews. We need to let the system correct, okay? But we are going in, because it takes time for the system to, there's so many recommendations that are trying to be acted upon and good progress happening. But this particular audit will shed a light across large organizations, a couple of small organizations, as well as common service providers to look at 3 areas. So they're in governance and also decision making are 2 of the key, and the integrity of the processes.
Thank you very much. That's our time. Mrs. Vignola.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I was talking about this cruise ship versus smaller ships earlier. And this applies to a lot of different places, not just the government, but people like to talk about accountability and responsibility. Humans in general don't like to get in trouble. Oops, sorry about that.
Désolé.
I apologize. It wakes me up well in the morning. So we're talking about accountability, responsibility. People don't like to be told what they're doing wrong, and yet it is necessary. It's not because we made a mistake and we're held accountable that we're going to lose our job. It's simply an opportunity to do better. The processes that are too simple don't cover everything. If it's too complicated, then we can become lost in the procedure. So how do we find the perfect balance to ensure that public services have, on the one hand, a list to ensure what they're doing? It's not a bad idea, but it's complicated, but then also not making it too simple. How do we make this effective? Thank you for the question. Earlier, I was talking about when the new procedures were implemented, and internally, we were looking to specialists to do this. We wanted to hear what can we do and what can't we do. And we did the same thing with people in human resources, CFOs, and in the public service. Because like you said earlier, the goal is to improve things, but we need to put practices on the table that are efficient, and we need to have the courage and the time to implement this in an optimal way for everyone? And you were talking about benchmarking, it's analyse comparative in French.
Rapidement.
Very briefly, you just talked about including people internally. I have been a manager in a school board. And what I found was that there was often a lack of recognition. And without that feeling of recognition, employees often were not really truly committed to their job and to improving. So how do you ensure that employees be recognized no matter what level they're at, whether these are new employees or senior employees? Thank you.
Les rapports
Public reports mean that all Canadians, including public servants, can read them, which makes people more engaged, it opens more discussion, and again, anyone can react to that.
Thanks. Mr. Bachrach, please.
I really think one of the most damning findings in the Auditor General's report is that officials throughout government departments who are in charge of procurement did not understand the procurement rules. It's just mind-blowing that is one of the key deficiencies that led to such a scathing report from the Auditor General. Is this like the best-kept secret, that there are these complex rules that nobody understands and so nobody documents anything? Was this known to PSPC prior to the internal probe, the Auditor General's probe, and the Ombudsman's probe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say that when I started doing procurement, it was pretty straightforward. We had 3 trade agreements that did apply. It was relatively simple. Lowest bidder, this is what people would usually do. Now there's much more complexity that have been added over time. We can think about unjust consideration. We can think about small and medium-sized businesses. So the procurement has changed. We've got a lot of rules, so we need to catch up. And I think that was one of the significant things where we're taking action. Last week, we had 600 procurement officers taking a training on record keeping. And we're going to be also having more and more training happening in the fall on making sure that composition is the norm, that the use of non-competitive tool is truly restricted. So I see a willingness from our staff to look at this old practice that was put in place and making sure that corrective measures are being taken.
It feels like a bit of an emperor has no clothes situation. All these people in all these departments don't understand the rules, and yet no one wants to say anything because they might appear like they're not good at their jobs. How can that be allowed to be the culture until there's this massive government-wide investigation of procurement that finds all of these systemic problems? Your departments have internal audit processes that. Yeah, and Ms. Ostrich said that actually lack of documentation is a common audit finding. One of the reasons for a lack of documentation is I didn't know I was supposed to document anything, or I don't actually know the rules around documentation. How did this not percolate up from the ground up to someone who's accountable that says, guess what? We have a major procurement problem. Nobody understands these rules. Someone's going to find out eventually that we're not wearing any clothes. Did that not happen?
So we're fixing that. We did create a new role, Chief Contract Quality Assurance, but I'll let my colleague from TBS to jump in, if I may.
Thank you. So
a brief response, Mr. Franco.
In our review of McKinsey contracts, we did find that there was an opportunity to strengthen managers' understanding of the procurement process. And so since then, we've done a number of measures like the manager's guide, like the mandatory procedures, but I also like to highlight that we're also doing learning events with managers. And just yesterday, we had an event with the Canada School titled Procuring with Integrity that was attended by over 1,000 managers across government. So we are taking measures to reinforce managers' responsibilities and help them understand how to make sure they're doing a good job.
Well, I have no doubt a lot is happening all of a sudden because there are these scathing reports. The question was, why didn't this happen much sooner? And I rest my case. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Bachrach. A very valid question and point. Thanks. Mr. Genuis, please.
Thank you, Chair. In my previous round, I spoke about the McKinsey model and how that's continuing today with carbon tax Carney, where there are inappropriate relationships between government and big business. We saw that with Dominic Barton having a foot in both worlds to the advantage of McKinsey. Now we see a similar phenomenon with carbon tax Carney. I want to make one additional comment on that, which is that in these cases, of course, we're not just talking about local or national elites, but people that are global elites. They don't just have relationships with big government and big business here in Canada, but they're also working with and engaging with governments around the world that have particular interests that may conflict with our own. I've asked this question before, and various officials at various departments have confirmed that there, in the case of McKinsey, was no effort to access a client list which would shed light on other clients, other governments around the world that McKinsey may be working for, where their work for those companies, those countries, conflicts with the national interests of Canada, and analysts may well be learning various things through their work with the government of Canada that informs their work for these other powers. So I think it's important to underline that this problem of elite facilitated inappropriate close relationships between big government and big business isn't just a national problem. It is a global problem where global elites are in these webs of conflict of interest that undermines the pursuit of the national common good here in Canada. Mr. Chair, having said that, I'd like to move now that the committee resume its consideration of the motion from Ms. Kuzi that was adjourned at our last meeting. I think we need to complete this work, and now is the time to do that. So I'll move that motion, which I believe is dilatory.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Generous. Dilatory, so we have to vote on it. Mr. Clerk, go ahead.
Recorded vote.
Yes, please.
Ms. Atwood?
Yes.
Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Jawari?
No.
Mr. Kuzmichek?
No.
Mr. Souza?
No.
Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Jennings?
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Madame Vignala?
Oui.
Mr. Backrack?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yay 6, and nays contre 4, 4.
It does pass. We are resuming the debate. I'll just read off where we left it. Given the Environment Department has failed in its audit of the administration of grants and contributions for poor oversight of millions of taxpayers' dollars spent on green subsidies and the potential legal and reputational damages this represents, the committee dedicate at least 3 meetings to the grant and contribution process and call on relevant witnesses to appear as decided by committee. That is the amended motion where we sit right now. And I think there's been some discussions about perhaps further amendments to clean it up and make it more palatable to everyone. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci. Oui, en effet, il y a eu.
Thank you. Yes, there were some discussions on the wording of the amendment. Oh, wait for everyone to get their pieces in. There were some discussions on the wording of the amendment to get to a consensus and to avoid prolonging discussions that never end. So an amendment, given that the Environment Department failed its audit on green subvention, subsidies, and so on and so forth. The committee should hold 3 meetings on these subsidies and hear from the witnesses that pertain to this study. So that would be changing the motion as it currently is. So I was looking for a consensus. However, the interpreter did not have the written amendment.
Thanks. Let me just suspend for 2 seconds. I just have to have a quick discussion. Hold on 2 seconds. Vignola.
Rapidement, Monsieur le Président.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, I'd like to look to yourself and the clerk. If I remember correctly, Monday we agreed upon in our discussions between 4 and 6 meetings. Now, the version that I received this morning that said what had happened said at least 3 meetings. But if I remember correctly, I think that we had put a 4 to 6 meeting limit on this. So the amendment that I suggested may have been based upon a mistake in the way this was worded.
I think it was at 3 for this specific one, but we'll double check the blues.
OK. Juste au cas où, là, mais
Okay, just in case, but
Their motion we were discussing.
possiblement. Possiblement, on en a eu 4. Donc, ça se peut, je me mélange.
it's possible there were 4, so I could get mixed up.
Indigenous was 4 to between
OK.
4 and 6.
Merci
This is on
beaucoup.
3.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay.
Donc,
No,
Okay, thank you very much. So the motion that I have suggested here doesn't change anything except for what I said, removing certain words.
please. I'm not hearing very well.
merci. Étant donné qu'il n'y a pas d'erreur sur le nombre de réunions,
Thank you. Given that there are no issues with the number of meetings, there was no mistake there. That means that this doesn't change as much as I said before. So certain words have been removed from the motion to make it more fluid.
Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
Yeah, I'd like to move on, hopefully a friendly amendment. We'd like to move on this as quickly as possible. We think that this is an important study. I think for the most part, 99.999%, we are on the same page. We want to move forward with this. So the 2 amendments that I'd like to bring forward is to remove the word failed, so that it reads, given the environmental department's audit of the administration of grants and contributions on green subsidies and the quote potential legal and reputational damage this represents, and continue onwards. So really just remove has failed, so that it says given the environment department's audit, and then continues onward. That quote is.
Was there a second one you had?
Yes. The second one would be that for now we agree to 3 meetings, so that we remove the at least in the 3 meetings, so that it is 3 meetings. And then, of course, after those 3 meetings, we can determine if additional meetings are required. So I would say 2 minor changes is what we would recommend. But again, we full-heartedly support Madame Vignola's the thrust of her motion.
Are you in agreement with that? And we'll, Mrs. Vignola?
moi, je ne vois pas d'inconvénient.
I don't see any problems at this point. 3 meetings, I'm wondering if that's enough, but we have seen this before where we have a certain number of meetings and then potentially can add some more if we need it later. Now, in the English version, I noticed a little bit of a difference with the French. It's a little more complicated in the French, but I will send that too. I don't see any issue if my colleagues are in agreement. I can send you the modifications that I will suggest.
Well, let's try and deal with Mr. Kuzmirchuk's before we go back and forth. His is just changing, and this is up to you, Mrs. Vignola. Otherwise, we'll just go to a debate on it. Changing at least 3 meetings to 3 meetings, and we're taking out failed.
Has failed.
Yeah, has failed.
Katie.
Are we fine with that, Mrs. Vignola? Or so we'll consider that the amendment put forward by Mrs. Vignola. Okay, so we will just start a speaking order on this motion as amended, with Mrs. Vignola's amendment now saying, taking out the word has failed, and then you want to leave that in? Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, I have assumed that Ms. Vignola submitted an amendment because she's already removed some words from where we left off the motion on Tuesday, and that what Mr. Kushmerchuk is proposing is a sub-amendment to her amendment. Oh, a friendly amendment that she's accepted. Okay. So can you
Speed things along.
can you read?
Sure, I'll have the clerk read back
Thank
as
you.
it is with the agreed friendly amendment, Mrs. Vignola's amendment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it would read as follows: given the Environment Department's audit of the administration of grants and contribution on green subsidies and the potential legal and reputational damage this represents, the committee dedicate 3 meetings to the grant and contribution process and call on relevant witnesses to appear as decided by the committee.
Mr. Backrack? We're starting one on this
The
amendment.
Yes.
As it
Oh,
is.
definitely. I think I support the spirit of the amendment. To me, I'm somewhat agnostic. The idea is here is that we're going to have 3 meetings to talk about this issue, and it comes down to whether we include pejorative language characterizing the audit. I don't know if you pass or fail an audit like that. I think calling it a scathing audit would be accurate. But again, like the point here is to kick off a study where we're able to get answers and hold people accountable. And I think the simplified wording does that nicely, and I support the amendment as suggested.
I see nods all around. Can we accept that as is?
Yes.
Do we want me to have the clerk read it back just one last time, or are we
I
comfortable
think we're
with
good.
that?
We're good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Kusmirchuk. Thank you, Mrs. Vignola. Thank you, Mrs. Block. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. We will consider it. The sub-amendment, as amended, sorry. The amendment adopted, the motion as amended. I see nods all around, adopted as well. Wonderful. Well, if
We get to
there's
go home
nothing else,
early?
maybe we can get out for lunch early. Thanks very much, everyone. We are adjourned.